Ashenmeres Stand. Lady Rosamond of Whitmore had always been the dutiful daughter, until she was forced to wed Sir Hugh Fitzalan, a warrior feared more than respected. She expected coldness, but when he touched her hand, her pulse betrayed her. "You do not want this marriage," he murmured. "Then why do you shiver when I stand close?" Chapter 1. The Reluctant Bride. The cold, damp stone of Whitmore Castle seemed to seep into Rosamond's very bones, mirroring the chill that had settled in her heart. The heavy velvet of her bridal gown, a deep crimson embroidered with gold thread depicting the intertwined roses of her house, felt more like a shroud than a symbol of celebration. The scent of beeswax candles and the faint, lingering aroma of incense from the chapel did little to mask the underlying scent of fear that clung to the air, thick and cloying. She stared out the narrow window, her gaze lost in the swirling gray mist that blanketed the valley below. The distant, rolling hills of her childhood, usually a comforting sight, now seemed to mock her with their freedom. Her fingers, adorned with the heavy signet ring of House Whitmore, traced the intricate carvings on the windowsill. The stone was worn smooth from centuries of hands resting there, hands that had likely witnessed countless such unions, alliances forged in duty, not love. Rosamond wondered if any of those women had felt this same knot of dread twisting in their stomachs, this same suffocating sense of inevitability. "My lady?" A soft voice broke through her reverie. Alara, her handmaiden and closest confidant, stood hesitantly in the doorway. Her usually bright eyes were clouded with concern, her delicate features etched with a worry that mirrored Rosamond's own. Alara had been with her since they were children, sharing secrets whispered in the dead of night, dreams spun from the threads of hope and youthful fancy. Now, those dreams seemed distant, as fragile as spun glass. "He is here," Alara said, her voice barely a whisper. "Sir Hugh Fitzalan has arrived." The name sent a shiver down Rosamond's spine, not of anticipation, but of apprehension. Sir Hugh Fitzalan, the Black Lion of Narum, a warrior of renowned ferocity, a man whose name was spoken in hushed tones, even among the seasoned knights of the realm. He was a legend carved from steel and blood, a man known for his unwavering loyalty to the king and his ruthless efficiency on the battlefield. And now he was to be her husband. Rosamond closed her eyes, trying to conjure an image of him. She had seen him only once from afar, at a tournament years ago. He had been a figure of imposing strength, his armor gleaming black in the sunlight, his face obscured by the visor of his helmet. She remembered the way he had moved, with a controlled power that spoke of both discipline and danger. All she truly knew of him was reputation, and reputation spoke of a man hardened by war, untouched by tenderness. "My father?" Rosamond asked, her voice betraying the tremor she felt. "He awaits you in the great hall," Alara replied, stepping closer and gently taking Rosamond's hand. Her touch was warm and reassuring, a small comfort in the face of the storm that was about to break. "He wishes to speak with you before the ceremony." Rosamond nodded, her throat tight with unshed tears. Her father, Lord Edmund of Whitmore, was a man of duty and tradition. He had always done what he believed was best for his family, for his lands. This marriage, this alliance with the powerful and feared Sir Hugh, was undoubtedly in the best interests of Whitmore. It would secure their borders, strengthen their alliances, and protect them from the growing unrest that simmered across the kingdom. But at what cost? She allowed Alara to adjust her veil, the delicate lace obscuring her vision, a fitting metaphor for the uncertainty that lay ahead. The weight of the gold circlet that held the veil in place felt heavy on her head, a symbol of the burdens she was about to assume. As she walked through the familiar corridors of the castle, the echoes of her footsteps seemed to mock her with their finality. Each step was a step closer to a life she had not chosen, a life bound to a man she did not know. The tapestries that adorned the walls, depicting scenes of heroic battles and courtly love, seemed to blur into a tapestry of her own impending fate. The great hall was a scene of controlled chaos. Servants scurried about, making last-minute adjustments to the long tables laden with food and drink. Banners bearing the crests of both House Whitmore and House Fitzalan hung from the high, vaulted ceiling. The air was thick with the scent of roasted meats, spiced wine, and the nervous energy of the assembled guests. Lord Edmund stood at the head of the hall, his face stern and unyielding. He was a tall, imposing man, his silver hair a testament to his years of service to the crown. He wore a tunic of deep blue, the Whitmore rose embroidered on his chest. Beside him stood his brother, Lord Thomas, a man of softer features and a more jovial disposition, but his smile did not reach the usual mirth in his eyes, as he too was troubled about this union. As Rosamond approached, her father held out his hand. His grip was firm, but she felt a slight tremor in his touch. "Rosamond," he said, his voice deep and resonant, filling the hall. "You look radiant." The word felt hollow, a formality in the face of the reality they both faced. She managed a weak smile, a pale imitation of the joy a bride should feel. "Father," she replied, her voice steady, despite the turmoil within. He drew her aside, into a small alcove, away from the prying eyes and ears of the court. "This is not easy, my child," he began, his voice softening slightly. "I know this is not the life you envision for yourself." "I understand my duty, Father," Rosamond said, her gaze meeting his. "I will do what is required of me." "Duty is a heavy burden," he said, his eyes searching hers. "But it is not always a prison. Sir Hugh, he is a man of honor. He may be rough around the edges, forged in the fires of war, but I believe he has a good heart, buried beneath that armor." Rosamond doubted it. How could a man known as the Black Lion possess a good heart? But she held her tongue. Arguing with her father was futile. He had made his decision, and she would abide by it. "I pray you are right, Father," she said, her voice barely a whisper. He placed a hand on her cheek, his touch surprisingly gentle. "Be strong, Rosamond. Be the Rose of Whitmore. Endure. And perhaps you will find something unexpected in this union." His words offered a sliver of hope, a fragile seed planted in the barren landscape of her fear. But as the doors of the great hall opened, revealing the imposing figure of Sir Hugh Fitzalan, that seed withered. He stood there, a silhouette against the flickering torchlight, his presence filling the hall. He was taller than she remembered, broader of shoulder, his armor gleaming darkly. He wore no helmet, and for the first time, Rosamond saw his face. It was a face carved from granite, strong and unyielding, with a jawline that spoke of determination and eyes that were the color of a stormy sea. A scar ran down his left cheek, a testament to his battles. He was not handsome in the conventional sense, but there was a raw power about him, a magnetism that both terrified and intrigued her. He began to walk towards her, his steps measured and deliberate. The silence in the hall was deafening, broken only by the crackling of the fire in the hearth and the beat of Rosamond's own heart. As he reached her, he stopped, his gaze meeting hers. His eyes were intense, scrutinizing, as if he were trying to see into her very soul. She felt a blush creep up her cheeks, a betrayal of her inner turmoil. He extended his hand, his gloved fingers brushing against hers. The touch, though brief, sent a jolt of electricity through her. It was not a gentle touch, but it was not cruel either. It was searching. "Lady Rosamond," he said, his voice a deep rumble that resonated within her. "You do not want this marriage." It was not a question, but a statement of fact. She met his gaze, her pride refusing to let her cower before him. "No, Sir Hugh," she admitted, her voice surprisingly steady. "I do not." A flicker of something surprise? Respect? Crossed his features. He did not release her hand. Instead, his grip tightened, almost imperceptibly. "Then why," he murmured, his voice low and intimate, for her ears only, "do you shiver when I stand close?" His words hung in the air, a challenge and a question, a spark of something unexpected in the cold, damp confines of her arranged marriage. The shiver that ran through her this time was not entirely from fear. It was a tremor of something else, something she could not name, something that stirred a flicker of defiance and anticipation. She would endure, just as her father said, and she will learn what it means to be the wife of the feared warrior. Chapter 2. Whispers of Whitmore. The wedding ceremony was a blur of Latin chants, solemn vows, and the heavy weight of expectation. Rosamund felt detached, as if she were watching the proceedings from afar, a spectator in her own life. The ring Sir Hugh placed on her finger, a thick band of gold bearing the Fitzalan lion, felt cold and alien against her skin. The kiss he bestowed upon her was perfunctory, a brief pressing of lips that held no warmth, no passion, only the seal of a contract. The feast that followed was a lavish affair, a display of Whitmore's wealth and hospitality. But Rosamund had little appetite. She picked at the roasted pheasant and the honeyed cakes, her stomach churning with anxiety. The boisterous laughter and conversations of the guests seemed to swirl around her, a cacophony of noise that only served to amplify her isolation. Sir Hugh sat beside her, a silent, brooding presence. He ate sparingly, his gaze constantly scanning the hall, as if he were assessing threats rather than enjoying the festivities. He spoke little, and when he did, his words were curt and to the point. He seemed more comfortable in the company of his men-at-arms, a group of hardened warriors who shared his guarded demeanor. Rosamund observed him from the corner of her eye, trying to decipher the man behind the armor. He was an enigma, a closed book. She wondered about his past, about the battles he had fought, the scars he carried, both visible and hidden. What had shaped him into the man he was? What lay beneath the surface of the Black Lion? As the evening wore on, the whispers began. Rosamund caught snippets of conversations, hushed tones, and furtive glances. The guests, mostly local lords and ladies loyal to Whitmore, were curious about their new lord and wary of his reputation. "He's a cold one, isn't he?" she heard one lady murmur to another. "Not a smile on his face all evening." "They say he killed a man with his bare hands in the last battle," another whispered. "Tore his throat out like a wolf." Rosamund shuddered. The stories, whether true or embellished, painted a picture of a brutal, merciless warrior. Was this the man she was now bound to for life? Later, as she and Sir Hugh were escorted to their chambers, the whispers followed them. Rosamund felt the weight of their gazes, the unspoken questions, the doubts. She could sense the unease of her own people, their loyalty to Whitmore now intertwined with their fear of Fitzalan. The bridal chamber was opulent, decorated with rich tapestries and furnished with a large, four-poster bed draped in crimson velvet. A fire crackled merrily in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. But the warmth of the fire did little to dispel the chill that had settled in Rosamund's heart. Sir Hugh stood by the window, his back to her, gazing out at the night. He had removed his heavy tunic, revealing a linen shirt that clung to his broad shoulders and muscular arms. He seemed lost in thought, oblivious to her presence. Rosamund hesitated, unsure of what to do, what to say. The silence stretched between them, thick and heavy with unspoken tension. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Sir Hugh?" He turned, his stormy gray eyes meeting hers. He looked weary, the lines of his face etched deeper in the firelight. "You should rest, Lady Rosamund," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "It has been a long day." "And you?" she asked, surprising herself with her boldness. He gave a slight shrug. "I am accustomed to little sleep." She noticed a weariness in his eyes, a hint of vulnerability that belied his formidable reputation. She wondered if he, too, felt the weight of this forced union, the burden of expectation. This marriage," she began, her voice faltering. "It is not what either of us wanted." He said nothing, merely continued to gaze at her, his expression unreadable. I will try to be a good wife, Sir Hugh," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "I will uphold the honor of Whitmore and of your name." A flicker of something amusement? Resignation? Crossed his features. "Duty," he said, his voice a low rumble. "It seems we are both bound by it." He turned back to the window, his silhouette outlined against the darkness. Do not concern yourself with being a good wife, Lady Rosamond, he said, his voice hardening. Concern yourself with surviving. His words sent a chill down her spine. Surviving? What did he mean? Was he threatening her? Or was he warning her? Before she could ask, he spoke again, his voice softer this time. Whitmore is not Narum. There are dangers here. Enemies within, as well as without. Rosamund's heart pounded in her chest. She had always known that court life was rife with intrigue and betrayal, but she had never felt directly threatened. Was Sir Hugh implying that her own people posed a danger to him? Or to her? What enemies? She asked, her voice trembling. Who would threaten us? He remained silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the darkness beyond the window. Then he turned back to her, his eyes filled with a cold, hard light. Trust no one, Lady Rosamond, he said, his voice a low growl. Trust no one but me. His words were both a command and a promise, a chilling revelation of the treacherous world she had entered. She was no longer simply the Lady of Whitmore. She was the wife of the Black Lion, and her life was now intertwined with his, a life of danger, uncertainty, and perhaps something more. The whispers of Whitmore had revealed a truth far more complex than she had imagined, a truth that left her trembling, not only with fear, but with a growing sense of unease about the very walls that had always been her home. She had a chilling premonition that her marriage was only the beginning of a far greater and more perilous journey. Chapter 3. The Warrior's Gaze. The following days settled into a strange, uneasy rhythm. Rosamund found herself navigating a world that was both familiar and foreign. Whitmore was her home, yet it felt different now, shadowed by the presence of Sir Hugh and his men. The familiar routines of castle life, morning prayers in the chapel, meals in the great hall, overseeing the household staff continued, but they were overlaid with a new layer of tension. Sir Hugh remained a distant figure, a man of few words and guarded emotions. He spent most of his days training his men in the courtyard, his presence a constant reminder of his martial prowess. Rosamund watched him from afar, observing the way he moved, the way he commanded, the way his men respected and feared him. He was a warrior through and through, his body honed to a weapon, his mind seemingly focused solely on duty and defense. He rarely spoke to her directly, and when he did, his words were brief and impersonal. He treated her with a cold courtesy, a formality that kept her at arm's length. He did not share her bed, sleeping instead in a separate chamber, a fact that both relieved and unsettled her. She was grateful for the respite from the intimacy she dreaded, yet she couldn't help but wonder if his rejection was a sign of his disdain for her, or something more. Alara, ever perceptive, noticed Rosamund's growing unease. "He is a hard man, my lady," she said one morning, as she helped Rosamund dress. "But not entirely without kindness. I saw him tend to a wounded falcon yesterday, with a gentleness that surprised me." Rosamund was intrigued. A falcon, a creature of the wild, of freedom and strength. It seemed an odd juxtaposition, the brutal warrior and the injured bird. "Where did he find it?" she asked. "In the forest, near the old hunting lodge," Alara replied. "Its wing was broken. He splinted it himself, and keeps it in his chambers." Rosamund's curiosity grew. She decided to seek him out, to see this hidden side of the man she had married. She found him in his chambers, not in the main room, but in a smaller, adjoining room that served as a makeshift aviary. He was sitting on a stool, his back to the door, his attention focused on the falcon perched on his gloved hand. The bird, a magnificent peregrine, was surprisingly calm, its sharp eyes fixed on Sir Hugh's face. Rosamund hesitated in the doorway, unsure whether to intrude. He seemed so different here, away from the watchful eyes of his men, away from the formality of the court. He was speaking to the falcon in a low, soothing voice, his words unintelligible, but his tone gentle and reassuring. He must have sensed her presence, for he turned, his stormy gray eyes meeting hers. He didn't seem surprised to see her, nor did he seem displeased. "He is healing well," he said, his voice a low rumble, indicating the falcon. Rosamund stepped closer, her gaze drawn to the bird. "He is beautiful," she said, her voice soft. "He is a fighter," Sir Hugh replied, a hint of admiration in his voice. "He will fly again." Rosamund looked at him, at the strong, calloused hands that held the delicate bird so gently. She saw a glimpse of something beyond the warrior, something that hinted at a deeper, more complex nature. "You have a kindness I did not expect, Sir Hugh," she said, her voice barely a whisper. He gave a slight shrug, his gaze returning to the falcon. "Even a warrior knows the value of life," he said, "and the importance of healing." His words resonated with her. She, too, was wounded in a way. Her spirit had been bruised, her dreams shattered. Perhaps, like the falcon, she could heal, too. May I see him closer?" she asked, her voice hesitant. He nodded, extending his arm towards her. She stepped closer, her fingers brushing against his glove as she reached out to touch the falcon's feathers. The bird remained calm, its gaze shifting from Sir Hugh to Rosamund. For a moment, their eyes met, hers and Sir Hugh's. It was a fleeting moment, a brief connection, but it was enough to send a shiver down her spine. His gaze was intense, searching, as if he were trying to see beyond her outward appearance, to understand the woman beneath the title. He said nothing, but she felt a shift in the air between them, a subtle lessening of the distance that had separated them. It was as if the falcon, a symbol of freedom and resilience, had created a bridge between their two worlds. "What will you call him?" she asked, breaking the silence. He paused, considering. "Shadow," he said finally, "for he came to me from the shadows of the forest." The name seemed fitting, both for the bird and for the man who had rescued it. Sir Hugh, too, seemed to exist in the shadows, a man of hidden depths and unspoken emotions. As Rosamund left his chambers, she carried with her a new understanding of her husband. He was still an enigma, a warrior shrouded in mystery, but she had seen a glimpse of something more, a flicker of humanity beneath the armor. The warrior's gaze, though still intense and scrutinizing, no longer held only coldness. There was a hint of something else, something that sparked a flicker of hope, a fragile seed of possibility in the barren landscape of her arranged marriage. She held to that small seed. It was all she had to keep her going. He had said to trust no one but him. Could she? Chapter 4. A pact forged in fear. The unease that had settled over Whitmore deepened in the following weeks. Rosamund noticed a growing tension among the household staff, a subtle shift in their demeanor. They seemed more guarded, more hesitant to speak freely, their eyes darting nervously toward Sir Hugh's men. The once familiar comfort of her home was slowly eroding, replaced by an undercurrent of suspicion and fear. One evening, Rosamund was summoned to her father's study. Lord Edmund looked grave, his face etched with worry. He dismissed the servants, ensuring they were alone. "Rosamund," he began, his voice low and urgent, "there are disturbing rumors circulating within the castle." Her heart quickened. "What rumors, father?" "Whispers of dissent," he said, his gaze meeting hers. "Of those who are unhappy with Sir Hugh's presence here." Rosamund felt a chill run down her spine. She had sensed the unease, but she had not realized the extent of it. "Who?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Who would speak against him?" Lord Edmund hesitated. "There are some who believe he is too harsh, too demanding. They fear his methods, his ruthlessness. But he is here to protect us," Rosamund said, defending her husband, though a part of her shared the same unsettling feeling about him. "To secure our borders." Her father agreed. "But some fear he seeks to control us, not protect us. They see him as an occupier, not an ally." He paused, then added, "And there are whispers of a plot." Rosamund's blood ran cold. "A plot? Against Sir Hugh?" Lord Edmund nodded grimly. "To remove him. By force, if necessary." The implications of his words were terrifying. A plot against Sir Hugh could mean civil war within Whitmore, a bloody conflict that could tear her home apart. And it could mean her own life was in danger as well. "We must tell him," Rosamund said, her voice urgent. We must warn him. Her father shook his head. Not yet.
We do not know who is involved.
It could be anyone, even those closest to us. The thought was chilling. To suspect her own people, her own friends, of treachery, it was almost unbearable. But we cannot do nothing, Rosamond insisted. We must find a way to protect him, to protect ourselves. Lord Edmund looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of pride and fear. You are strong, Rosamond. Stronger than you know. And you have an influence over him. He may not show it, but I believe he respects you. Rosamond doubted that. Sir Hugh still treated her with a cold distance, a formality that kept her at arm's length. But she knew she had to try. She had to find a way to reach him, to warn him, to perhaps even earn his trust. That night, she sought him out in his chambers. He was alone, as usual, tending to Shadow, the falcon. The bird was perched on his gloved hand, its eyes bright and alert. Sir Hugh looked up as she entered, his expression unreadable. Lady Rosamond, he said, his voice a low rumble. Is there something you require? She hesitated, unsure of how to begin. The words felt heavy on her tongue, the weight of the secret she carried almost overwhelming. I have heard rumors, she began, her voice trembling slightly. Disturbing rumors. His gaze sharpened, his eyes narrowing. What rumors? She took a deep breath, forcing herself to meet his gaze. Whispers of a plot. Against you. He remained silent for a long moment, his expression unchanged. Then he gave a slight nod. I am aware, he said, his voice calm. Rosamond was surprised. You know? But how? I have my sources, he replied, his gaze returning to the falcon. Just as your father has his. She realized then that he was not as isolated as she had thought. He had his own network of informants, his own way of gathering intelligence. He was a warrior, always prepared for battle, even within the walls of his own castle. But who is behind it? She asked, her voice urgent. Who would betray you? He shrugged. It does not matter. They will fail. His confidence, though reassuring in a way, also frightened her. He seemed so certain of his victory, so dismissive of the danger. But they could hurt you, she said, her voice barely a whisper. They could kill you. He looked at her then, his stormy gray eyes meeting hers. There was a flicker of something in his gaze, a hint of surprise? Or was it something else? And would that displease you, Lady Rosamond? He asked, his voice low and challenging. She was taken aback by his question. Did he truly believe she wished him harm? No, she said, her voice firm. It would not. I do not want you to die. Her words were honest, though she couldn't fully explain why. She still feared him, still resented this forced marriage, but she also recognized his strength, his honor. And she had seen a glimpse of his kindness, a hint of the man beneath the armor. He continued to gaze at her, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke, his voice softer this time. We are bound together, Lady Rosamond, he said. By marriage, by duty, by fate. We must trust each other, or we will both perish. His words were a pact, a fragile agreement forged in the face of fear and uncertainty. It was not a declaration of love, not even a promise of friendship, but it was a recognition of their shared destiny, a recognition that their survival depended on each other. I will help you, she said, her voice gaining strength. I will do what I can to uncover this plot, to protect you and to protect Whitmore. He nodded, a slight inclination of his head. Then we will face this danger together, he said, as husband and wife. It was the first time he had acknowledged their union as something more than a formality, the first time he had spoken of them as a unit, a team. It was a small step, but it was a significant one. Rosamond would need to find out who she could trust, a task which seemed impossible when the threat lurked somewhere in the shadows of her own home. The pact made in fear was her only solace, for now. A fragile beginning in a perilous game. Chapter 5. Shadows of the Past. The days that followed were filled with a tense, quiet urgency. Rosamond, guided by Sir Hugh's terse instructions and her own instincts, began to investigate the whispers of dissent within Whitmore. It was a delicate dance, a careful balancing act between appearing the dutiful, uninvolved wife and subtly probing for information. She moved through the castle like a ghost, her ears attuned to every whispered conversation, her eyes alert to every furtive glance. She started with Alara, her most trusted confidant. Alara, though loyal to Rosamond, was also deeply connected to the other servants, privy to their gossip and grievances. Alara, Rosamond said one afternoon, as they sat together in the solar, ostensibly discussing the household accounts, "Have you heard anything unusual lately? Any talk among the staff?" Alara hesitated, her fingers fidgeting with the embroidery in her lap. "There is always talk, my lady," she said evasively. "But anything specific?" Rosamond pressed gently. "Anything about Sir Hugh?" Alara's gaze darted towards the door, as if checking for eavesdroppers. They fear him, my lady," she whispered. "They say he is too strict, too demanding. They miss the old ways." "The old ways?" Rosamond asked, her brow furrowing. "What old ways?" Before the marriage," Alara said, her voice barely audible. "When Lord Edmund was the sole master of Whitmore. When things were simpler." Rosamond understood. The arrival of Sir Hugh and his men had disrupted the established order of Whitmore, creating resentment and fear. But she needed more than general discontent. She needed names, specific individuals who might be involved in the plot. "Is there anyone in particular who seems especially unhappy?" she asked, her voice low and urgent. Alara hesitated again, her eyes filled with conflict. She was torn between her loyalty to Rosamond and her fear of betraying her fellow servants. There is Master Giles," she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. "The steward. He has been very vocal in his disapproval of Sir Hugh." Master Giles. The steward. A man of influence and authority within the household, a man who had served Lord Edmund for many years. He was a likely suspect. Rosamond thanked Alara, promising to keep her confidence. She then sought out her uncle, Lord Thomas, her father's brother. He was a jovial, seemingly harmless man, but Rosamond knew he was also shrewd and observant. "Uncle," she said, joining him in the gardens, where he was tending to his roses, "have you noticed any unrest among the people?" Lord Thomas chuckled. "Unrest? My dear niece, there is always unrest in a castle. It's the nature of the beast." "But anything more than usual?" Rosamond persisted. "Anything concerning?" He paused, his smile fading slightly. "There are whispers, Rosamond," he admitted. "Whispers of discontent. Some are not happy with your husband's methods." "Have you heard anything specific?" she asked, her voice low and urgent. "Anything about a plot?" He looked at her sharply, his eyes narrowing. "A plot? Where did you hear such a thing?" "It doesn't matter," she said. "Is it true?" He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "There are rumors," he said. "But rumors are often just that, rumors." "But this one feels different," Rosamond said. "It feels real." He sighed, his gaze drifting towards the castle walls.
"Perhaps," he said.
"Perhaps it is. But be careful, Rosamond. These are dangerous waters. You are playing a dangerous game." His warning echoed Sir Hugh's words. "Trust no one but me." But how could she trust him completely when she barely knew him? When his past was shrouded in shadows? That evening, she decided to confront him directly. She found him in the library, a rare occurrence, as he usually spent his evenings with his men, or tending to shadow. He was standing by the window, gazing out at the darkening landscape, a book in his hand. He didn't seem surprised to see her. "Sir Hugh," she said, her voice steady, "I have been investigating the rumors. I have learned some things." He turned, his stormy gray eyes meeting hers. "And what have you learned, Lady Rosamond?" She told him about Master Giles, the steward, and his vocal disapproval. She told him about the whispers of discontent among the staff, the longing for the old ways. He listened in silence, his expression unreadable. When she had finished, he gave a slight nod. "Giles," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I suspected as much. He is a man of ambition, a man who resents my authority." "But what will you do?" she asked. "How will you stop him?" He turned back to the window, his gaze fixed on the darkness. "I will deal with him," he said, his voice cold and hard. "As I deal with all my enemies." His words sent a chill down her spine. She knew what he meant. He would use force, violence, to quell the dissent. It was the way of the warrior, the way of the Black Lion. But she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. Was there not another way? A way to avoid bloodshed, to find a peaceful resolution? As she watched him, she noticed the book he held in his hand. It was not a military treatise, as she had expected, but a volume of poetry, ancient verses of love and loss. She was surprised. You read poetry?" she asked, her voice betraying her astonishment. He gave a slight shrug, a hint of defensiveness in his posture. "Even a warrior needs solace," he said. "Words can be as powerful as swords." She stepped closer, her gaze drawn to the book. "What is it about?" she asked. He hesitated, then recited a few lines, his voice surprisingly melodic. "Though shadows fall and darkness reigns, a flicker of hope still remains." The words resonated with her, echoing her own fragile hope, her own determination to find a way through the darkness. He closed the book, his gaze meeting hers. There was a vulnerability in his eyes, a hint of a past sorrow, a shadow that haunted him. "I had a wife once," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "She died years ago, in childbirth, along with our child." The revelation stunned her. He had been married, he had loved, he had lost. The shadows of his past were deeper, more painful than she had imagined. He had been carrying a burden much heavier than she understood. This glimpse of his past, of his grief, softened something in her heart. Chapter 6. The Falcon's Flight. The revelation of Sir Hugh's past loss hung in the air between them, a silent testament to the hidden depths of the man she had married. It changed something in Rosamond, softening her perception of him, adding another layer to the complex tapestry of his character. He was not merely a warrior, a Black Lion. He was a man who had known love and loss, a man who carried the scars of a past tragedy. The following morning, Rosamond awoke with a renewed sense of purpose. She was determined to help him, not only to protect him from the plot but also to understand him, to bridge the gap that separated them. She sought him out in the courtyard, where he was training his men. He was a whirlwind of motion, his sword flashing in the sunlight, his commands ringing out across the yard. He moved with a grace and power that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. As he finished a sparring match, she approached him, her heart pounding in her chest. "Sir Hugh," she said, her voice steady despite her nervousness, "may I speak with you?" He turned, his face flushed with exertion, his eyes still holding the fire of battle. He nodded curtly, dismissing his men with a wave of his hand. They walked towards the stables, a relatively quiet corner of the castle grounds. Rosamond noticed the way his men watched them, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and respect. "You wish to speak?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "Yes," she said, her gaze meeting his. About yesterday." "About what you told me." He said nothing, merely waited for her to continue. "I am sorry for your loss," she said, her voice sincere. "I did not know." He gave a slight shrug, his gaze drifting towards the horses. "It was a long time ago," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "But it still affects you," she said, her voice gentle. "I can see it in your eyes." He looked at her then, his stormy gray eyes searching hers. There was a vulnerability in his gaze, a hint of the pain he had tried to conceal. "Grief is a constant companion," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It never truly leaves you. It simply changes shape." His words resonated with her. She, too, carried her own grief, the loss of her dreams, the weight of her forced marriage. "I understand," she said, her voice soft. "More than you know." He remained silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on hers. Then he spoke, his voice softer than usual. "You are different, Lady Rosamond," he said. "Different from what I expected." "Different how?" she asked, her heart quickening. "You are stronger," he said, "and more compassionate." His words were a small compliment, but they meant the world to her. It was a recognition of her character, a validation of her efforts. "I am trying," she said, her voice gaining strength. "Trying to understand you, trying to help you, trying to make this marriage work." He nodded slowly. "And I am trying to let you," he said, his voice hesitant. It was the closest he had come to admitting any vulnerability, any willingness to open himself up to her. It was a small step, but it was a significant one. At that moment, a commotion erupted from the direction of his chambers. A servant came running towards them, his face pale with fear. "My lord,"
he cried.
"the falcon's shadow, he is gone." Sir Hugh's face hardened, his eyes narrowing.
"Gone? How?"
"The window, it was open," the servant stammered. He must have flown away." Rosamund saw a flicker of something in Sir Hugh's eyes. Panic?
Despair?
It was quickly masked, replaced by his usual stoic expression. "Search the grounds," he commanded, his voice sharp. "Find him." The servant hurried away, and Sir Hugh turned to Rosamund, his gaze intense. "He will not survive long in the wild," he said, his voice tight with concern. "His wing, it is still weak." Rosamund understood his worry. The falcon was more than just a pet, it was a symbol of his own healing, his own resilience. And it was a connection between them, a shared concern that had bridged the gap between their two worlds. "We will find him," she said, her voice firm. "We will search together." And so they did. They searched the castle grounds, the gardens, the surrounding forest. They called out to him, their voices echoing through the trees. But there was no sign of Shadow. As the day wore on, Rosamund began to lose hope. The falcon was small, vulnerable, and the forest was vast and dangerous. But Sir Hugh refused to give up. He continued to search, his determination unwavering. He seemed driven by a desperate need to find the bird, as if his own fate were somehow tied to its survival. Finally, as dusk began to settle, they found him. He was perched on a high branch of an ancient oak tree, his silhouette outlined against the fading light. He was injured, his wing drooping, his feathers ruffled. Sir Hugh let out a sigh of relief, a sound that was almost a sob. He reached out to the falcon, his voice low and soothing. "Shadow," he murmured.
"Come, boy.
"Come to me." The falcon hesitated, then, with a flutter of wings, launched itself from the branch. It flew towards Sir Hugh, landing awkwardly on his outstretched arm. He held the bird close, his fingers gently stroking its feathers. He examined its wing, his brow furrowed with concern. "He is hurt," he said, his voice tight with emotion. "But he is alive." Rosamund watched him, her heart filled with a mixture of relief and admiration. She had seen a side of him she had never seen before, a vulnerability, a tenderness that belied his warrior facade. As they walked back to the castle, the falcon nestled against Sir Hugh's chest. She felt a shift in their relationship. The shared experience of searching for Shadow, the shared relief of finding him, had created a bond between them, a connection that transcended their forced marriage. The falcon's flight had mirrored their own journey, a journey of fear, uncertainty, and perhaps the beginning of something more. A fragile hope, carried on the wings of a wounded bird. Chapter 7. Scars of Loyalty. The incident with Shadow served as a catalyst, drawing Rosamund and Sir Hugh closer, albeit tentatively. They began to share small moments, brief conversations that went beyond the formalities of their arranged marriage. He would sometimes join her in the gardens, watching her tend to the roses, a faint smile playing on his lips. He even started to seek her opinion on matters of the castle, valuing her insights into the workings of Whitmore and its people. However, the threat of the plot still loomed, a dark cloud hanging over their fragile truce. Rosamund continued her discreet inquiries, piecing together fragments of information, trying to identify the key players in the conspiracy. Master Giles, the steward, remained a prime suspect, his resentment towards Sir Hugh palpable. But she suspected there were others involved, higher-ranking individuals who were pulling the strings from the shadows. One evening, she discovered a clue, a seemingly insignificant detail that sparked her suspicion. She was examining the household accounts, a task she had taken upon herself to better understand the workings of the castle when she noticed a discrepancy. A large sum of money had been withdrawn from the treasury, ostensibly for the purchase of supplies, but there was no record of the goods ever arriving. She brought the discrepancy to Sir Hugh's attention, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. She found him in the library, poring over a map of the surrounding lands. "Sir Hugh," she said, her voice hesitant, "I have found something troubling." He looked up, his stormy gray eyes meeting hers. "What is it?" She showed him the accounts, pointing out the missing funds. He examined the documents carefully, his brow furrowed in concentration. "This is unusual," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Master Giles handles all the financial matters. He would have to authorize such a withdrawal." "It seems he did," Rosamund said, her voice trembling slightly. "But there is no record of the supplies. Where did the money go?" Sir Hugh remained silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the documents. Then he looked at her, his eyes hardening. "It appears our steward is not only discontented but also dishonest," he said, his voice cold and hard. "He is lining his pockets, likely using the funds to fuel the rebellion." Rosamund's blood ran cold. The missing money confirmed her suspicions, solidifying Master Giles's involvement in the plot. But it also raised a more disturbing question. Who was he working with? Who was receiving the funds? "We must confront him," Rosamund said, her voice urgent. "We must expose him." Sir Hugh shook his head. "Not yet. We need proof. We need to know who his allies are. We need to unravel the entire web." He was right. A premature confrontation could alert the other conspirators, giving them time to cover their tracks or, worse, to strike. "But what do we do?" she asked, her voice filled with frustration. "We watch," he said, his voice grim. "We wait. And we gather more information." He then revealed something that surprised her. He had his own spy, a man-at-arms named Gareth, who had infiltrated Master Giles's inner circle. Gareth had been feeding Sir Hugh information about the steward's activities, confirming his suspicions of disloyalty. "Gareth is loyal," Sir Hugh said, a hint of pride in his voice. "He has served me for many years. He would never betray me." Rosamund was relieved to hear that Sir Hugh had someone he trusted, someone who could provide valuable intelligence. But she also couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy. She longed for that same level of trust, that same unwavering loyalty. As they continued to discuss the situation, Sir Hugh revealed another detail about his past, another scar of loyalty that he carried. "I once had a brother in arms," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of sadness and bitterness. "A man I trusted with my life. He betrayed me. He sided with my enemies during a rebellion. He almost killed me." The revelation explained much about his guarded nature, his reluctance to trust. He had been betrayed before, by someone he had considered a brother. The wound was deep, the scar still raw. The scars of loyalty cut two ways, the pain of betrayal and the burden of unwavering duty.
"What?"
"What happened?" Rosamund asked. "I was forced to kill him to protect myself and my men," Sir Hugh said. Rosamund understood. She needed to be careful not to betray that trust, not to add another scar to the many he already carried. He was so used to betrayal, so accustomed to the burden of duty that he struggled with trust. "I am not your enemy, Sir Hugh," she said, her voice firm. "I am your wife, and I will stand by you." He looked at her, his stormy gray eyes searching hers. There was a flicker of something in his gaze, a hint of hope. Or was it simply gratitude? I am beginning to believe that, Lady Rosamund," he said, his voice softer than usual. It was a small victory, a fragile step towards a deeper connection. But the road ahead was still fraught with danger, with the threat of the plot looming large, a constant reminder of the treacherous world they inhabited. The scars of loyalty, both his and hers, would be tested in the days to come. The fate of the couple and the castle could hinge on the loyalties of others. Chapter 8. Beneath the Armor. The fragile trust that had begun to grow between Rosamund and Sir Hugh was tested almost daily. The constant threat of the plot, The ever-present tension within the castle created an atmosphere of suspicion and unease. Yet, amidst the danger, they found moments of connection, small glimpses into each other's hearts that hinted at a deeper, more meaningful relationship. One evening, Rosamund found Sir Hugh in the training yard, not practicing with his men, but alone, working with a new horse. The animal, a magnificent black stallion, was spirited and unruly, resisting Sir Hugh's attempts to control it. Rosamund watched from a distance, fascinated by the interplay between man and beast. She had always loved horses, and she admired Sir Hugh's skill and patience. He spoke to the stallion in a low, soothing voice, his hands gentle but firm. He seemed to understand the animal's fear, its wildness. After a long struggle, he finally managed to calm the horse, to gain its trust. He stroked its neck, his touch surprisingly tender. Rosamund approached him, her footsteps echoing softly on the cobblestones. "He is beautiful," she said, her voice admiring. Sir Hugh looked up, a faint smile playing on his lips.
"He is a challenge," he said.
"But he has potential. What will you call him?"
she asked.
He paused, considering. "Midnight," he said finally, "for his coat is as black as the darkest night." The name seemed fitting, mirroring the stallion's wildness and Sir Hugh's own enigmatic nature. "You have a way with animals," Rosamund said, her voice gentle. A gentleness I did not expect. He gave a slight shrug, his gaze returning to the horse. "They are simpler than humans," he said. "Their loyalties are clear. Their hearts are untainted by betrayal." His words were a subtle reference to his own past, to the betrayal that had scarred him so deeply. Rosamund stepped closer, her hand reaching out to stroke Midnight's velvety nose. The horse nuzzled her hand, accepting her touch. "Not all humans are treacherous, Sir Hugh," she said, her voice soft. "There are some who are worthy of trust." He looked at her then, his stormy gray eyes meeting hers. There was a vulnerability in his gaze, a hint of longing. "I wish I could believe that," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You can," she said, her voice firm. "You must." She saw a flicker of something in his eyes, hope.
Doubt.
It was quickly masked, replaced by his usual guarded expression. "Come," he said, changing the subject. "Let me show you something." He led her to a small, secluded garden, hidden behind the stables. It was a place she had never seen before, a secret oasis of peace and tranquility. Roses bloomed in profusion, their fragrance filling the air. A small fountain gurgled softly, its water sparkling in the sunlight. This is beautiful," Rosamund said, her voice filled with wonder. "I did not know it existed." "It was my mother's garden," Sir Hugh said, his voice tinged with sadness. "She loved roses. She died when I was young." Another piece of his past, another shadow that haunted him. He had lost his mother, his wife, his child, his brother in arms. He had endured so much loss, so much pain. "I am sorry," Rosamund said, her voice sincere. He gave a slight nod, his gaze drifting towards the roses. "She used to say that roses were a symbol of hope," he said. "That even in the darkest of times, there is always beauty to be found." His words resonated with her. She, too, sought beauty, sought hope, amidst the darkness that surrounded them. They sat together on a stone bench, surrounded by the fragrant blooms. They spoke of simple things, of the beauty of the garden, of the changing seasons, of the horses. It was a moment of peace, a respite from the tension and danger that permeated their lives. As they talked, Rosamund noticed a small, almost imperceptible change in Sir Hugh. He seemed more relaxed, more open. He even smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes, transforming his stern features. She realized then that she was seeing him, truly seeing him, for the first time. Beneath the armor, beneath the warrior facade, there was a man of sensitivity, of vulnerability, of kindness. He was not the cold, ruthless black lion she had feared. He was a man capable of love, of loss, of hope. He allowed his humanity to shine through. He showed her the man beneath the armor, without his usual defenses. He trusted her enough to show his soul. "Sir Hugh," she said, her voice hesitant, "there is something I must ask you." He looked at her, his eyes questioning. Why did you agree to this marriage?" she asked. "You did not want it. You could have refused." He paused, considering his words carefully. "Duty," he said finally. "Loyalty to the king." He commanded it. "But was that the only reason?" she pressed. He hesitated again, then spoke, his voice low and raw. "I saw something in you, Lady Rosamond," he said. "Something that intrigued me. A strength, a resilience, a spark of defiance. I thought perhaps you could be a partner, not just a wife, but a true companion." His words were a revelation, a glimpse into his hidden desires, his unspoken hopes. He had not married her solely out of duty. He had seen something in her, something that had drawn him to her. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the garden, Rosamond felt a shift in her heart. The fear, the resentment, the uncertainty that had plagued her since her wedding day began to dissipate, replaced by a growing sense of understanding, of affection. She was beginning to see him, not as the Black Lion, but as Hugh, the man beneath the armor. And she was beginning to realize that perhaps, just perhaps, this forced marriage could become something more, something real, something beautiful. The garden, a symbol of his mother's love and a testament to hidden beauty, had become their sanctuary, a place where the armor could be shed and the true self could emerge. Chapter 9. The Tournament of Treachery. The annual Whitmore Tournament, a tradition dating back generations, was fast approaching. It was a time of celebration, of feasting and festivities, a chance for the knights of the realm to display their prowess and for the people of Whitmore to enjoy a respite from their daily labors. But this year, the tournament was overshadowed by the looming threat of the plot against Sir Hugh. Rosamond knew that the tournament would be a dangerous time, a perfect opportunity for the conspirators to strike. The crowds, the chaos, the focus on the games, it would be easy for an assassin to blend in, to get close to Sir Hugh. She voiced her concerns to him, her heart filled with dread.
"It is too risky," she said.
"You should not participate." He looked at her, his stormy gray eyes meeting hers. "I cannot show weakness, Rosamond," he said. "I must appear strong, confident. To withdraw would be seen as a sign of fear, of vulnerability." She understood his reasoning, but she couldn't shake her fear. "But your life is at stake," she insisted. "It is not worth the risk." He smiled, a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "A knight's life is always at stake, Rosamond," he said. "It is the nature of our calling." "But this is different," she argued. "This is a planned attack. A betrayal." He placed a hand on her arm, his touch surprisingly gentle. "I will be careful," he said. "I will have my men around me. I will not be an easy target." His reassurance did little to calm her fears. She knew that he was a skilled warrior, but even the strongest knight could be felled by a well-placed arrow, a poisoned dagger. As the day of the tournament arrived, Rosamond's anxiety grew. The castle grounds were transformed into a vibrant spectacle of color and sound. Banners bearing the crests of various noble houses fluttered in the breeze. Tents and pavilions were erected, housing merchants selling their wares, food vendors offering tempting delicacies, and entertainers juggling, singing, and performing acrobatics. The tournament itself was a grand affair. Knights in shining armor, mounted on magnificent war horses, clashed in the lists, their lances splintering against shields, their swords ringing out in the air. The crowd roared with excitement, cheering for their favorite champions. Sir Hugh participated in several events, displaying his skill and strength. He unhorsed several opponents, his victories met with thunderous applause. But Rosamond couldn't enjoy the spectacle. She watched him with a constant knot of fear in her stomach, her eyes scanning the crowd for any sign of danger. She noticed Master Giles, the steward, standing near the royal box, his face a mask of false pleasantry. He was talking to Lord Ashford, a powerful nobleman known for his ambition and his rivalry with Sir Hugh. Rosamond's suspicion deepened. Ashford was a likely ally, a man who would benefit from Sir Hugh's downfall. She tried to warn Sir Hugh, to tell him about her suspicions, but he was surrounded by his men, preparing for the next event. She couldn't get close to him, couldn't get his attention. As the day wore on, the tension mounted. The final event, the melee, was about to begin. It was a free-for-all, a chaotic battle involving all the remaining knights. It was the most dangerous event, the one where injuries were most likely to occur. Rosamund watched in horror as Sir Hugh entered the arena, his black armor gleaming in the sunlight. He was a formidable figure, a warrior in his element. But she knew that even he was vulnerable in the chaos of the melee. The battle began, a whirlwind of clashing steel, shouting men, and rearing horses. Rosamund scanned the crowd, her heart pounding in her chest. She saw Master Giles, his eyes fixed on Sir Hugh, a sinister smile playing on his lips. He was signaling to someone, a man hidden in the shadows of the stands. Rosamund realized, with a sickening certainty, that the attack was about to happen. She had to do something, to warn Sir Hugh, to save him. She pushed her way through the crowd, ignoring the protests of the spectators. She ran towards the arena, her voice screaming his name. "Hugh, beware!" Her cry was lost in the roar of the crowd, the din of the battle. But Sir Hugh, as if sensing her presence, turned his head. He saw her, his eyes widening in alarm. At that moment, the hidden man in the stands raised a crossbow, aiming it directly at Sir Hugh. Rosamund saw the glint of the bolt, the deadly projectile poised to strike. Without thinking, she threw herself in front of Sir Hugh, shielding him with her own body. The bolt whizzed past her, missing her by inches, striking the ground with a thud. Sir Hugh, stunned by her actions, reacted instantly. He drew his sword, his eyes blazing with fury. He charged towards the assassin, his movements swift and deadly. The crowd gasped, realizing what had happened. The melee came to a halt, the knights frozen in place. Sir Hugh dispatched the assassin with a single blow, his sword cleaving through the man's armor. He then turned to Rosamund, his face a mask of concern. "Rosamund," he cried, his voice filled with alarm. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, her body trembling with shock and relief. I am fine," she stammered. But he tried to kill you." He knelt beside her, his hands gently cupping her face. His eyes searched hers, filled with a mixture of gratitude and something more. You saved my life," he said, his voice choked with emotion. She had risked her own life to save his. And in that moment, she realized the depth of her feelings for him. It was no longer just duty, no longer just obligation. It was love. A love born of fear, of shared danger, of a growing understanding of the man beneath the armor. The tournament of treachery had revealed not only the plot against him, but also the depth of her own heart. Chapter 10. A Dance of Deception. The aftermath of the attempted assassination at the tournament sent shockwaves through Whitmore. The assassin was identified as a mercenary, hired by someone within the castle walls. Suspicion immediately fell on Master Giles, especially after Gareth, Sir Hugh's spy, confirmed that the steward had been seen meeting with the mercenary in the days leading up to the tournament. Sir Hugh, enraged by the attempt on his life and Rosamund's near-death experience, wanted to confront Giles immediately, to drag him before the court and expose his treachery. But Rosamund, still shaken but thinking clearly, urged caution. "We have strong suspicions, but no concrete proof," she argued. "If we accuse him openly, he will deny it. He will claim it is a fabrication, a plot to discredit him. We need irrefutable evidence." Sir Hugh, though still simmering with anger, recognized the wisdom in her words. He agreed to delay the confrontation, to gather more evidence, to unravel the entire network of conspirators. Rosamund, now fully aware of the depth of her feelings for Sir Hugh and determined to protect him, took a more active role in the investigation. She decided to use her position as Lady of Whitmore, her access to the castle's inner workings, to her advantage. She began to cultivate a closer relationship with Master Giles, feigning ignorance of his treachery. She invited him to dine with her, engaging him in seemingly casual conversations, subtly probing for information. It was a dangerous game, a dance of deception, but she was determined to play it. Giles, emboldened by her apparent naivete, began to drop hints, subtle boasts about his influence, his connections. He spoke of powerful friends who were unhappy with Sir Hugh's rule, who longed for the old ways to return. Rosamund listened patiently, pretending to be sympathetic to his grievances. She encouraged him to speak freely, to confide in her. She learned that Lord Ashford was indeed involved in the plot, providing financial support and political backing. She also discovered that several other prominent figures within Whitmore, including some of her father's own advisors, were secretly supporting the rebellion. The revelation was a blow to Rosamund, a betrayal that cut deep. To think that her own people, her own friends, were plotting against her husband. Against her it was almost unbearable. She shared her findings with Sir Hugh, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and sadness. "It is worse than we thought," she said. "The conspiracy runs deep. It reaches into the very heart of Whitmore." Sir Hugh listened in silence, his face a mask of grim determination. He knew that he was facing a formidable enemy, a network of powerful individuals who were determined to remove him by any means necessary. "We must be careful, Rosamund," he said, his voice low and urgent. "We cannot trust anyone, not even those we thought were our allies." He was right. They were surrounded by enemies, by hidden dangers. They had to be vigilant, to watch their backs, to trust only each other. As they continued their investigation, Rosamund discovered another piece of the puzzle, a secret that had been hidden for years. She found a hidden passage, a secret tunnel that led from Master Giles's chambers to a secluded area outside the castle walls. It was the perfect route for smuggling messages, for meeting with conspirators, for planning an attack. She showed the passage to Sir Hugh, her heart pounding with excitement and fear. "This is how they are communicating," she said. "This is how they are planning their next move." Sir Hugh explored the passage, his face grim. He realized that the conspirators were not simply plotting to assassinate him, they were planning a full-scale rebellion, a siege of Whitmore. "They are gathering forces," he said, his voice filled with a cold fury. "They intend to take the castle by force." The situation was dire. They were outnumbered, outmaneuvered. They had to act quickly, to find a way to defend themselves, to save Whitmore. The dance with deception ended. "We need to get ahead of them," Rosamund stated. "I have a plan," he answered, his voice resolute. The plan required stealth, courage, and a willingness to deceive those that plotted against them. He decided to use the upcoming feast, a celebration planned in honor of the king's birthday, as a trap. He would invite all the suspected conspirators, lulling them into a false sense of security, and then strike. Rosamund saw the steel in his eyes. It was time to make their move. He would not be a victim. Chapter 11. The Price of Honor. The king's birthday feast was a lavish affair, a spectacle of opulence and forced merriment. The great hall was adorned with banners and tapestries, the long tables laden with roasted meats, spiced wine, and elaborate pastries. The air was thick with the scent of food and drink, the sound of music and laughter, but beneath the surface, a current of tension and suspicion ran deep. Rosamund, dressed in a gown of deep blue velvet, embroidered with silver thread, played the role of the gracious hostess, smiling and chatting with the guests, all the while her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. She knew that many of those present were her enemies, conspirators plotting against her husband, against her. Sir Hugh, standing beside her, was a picture of calm authority, his black armor gleaming in the torchlight. He greeted the guests with a polite nod, a faint smile playing on his lips, but his eyes were watchful, alert to any sign of treachery. Master Giles, Lord Ashford, and several other suspected conspirators were present, their faces masks of false cordiality. They exchanged knowing glances, subtle signals that betrayed their hidden agenda. Rosamund watched them carefully, her senses on high alert. She noticed the way they positioned themselves, the way they whispered to each other, the way they avoided Sir Hugh's gaze. They were like wolves in sheep's clothing, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. As the feast progressed, Sir Hugh gave a signal, a subtle gesture that only his loyal men at arms understood. They began to move through the hall, discreetly positioning themselves near the exits, blocking any escape routes. The tension in the hall grew palpable, a silent battle of wills between Sir Hugh and his enemies. Rosamund felt a knot of fear tighten in her stomach. She knew that the moment of reckoning was fast approaching. Finally, as the musicians played a lively tune, Sir Hugh rose to his feet, his voice ringing out across the hall. "My lords, my ladies," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I have a toast to propose."
"To the king."
The guests raised their goblets, their voices echoing his words. But as they drank, Sir Hugh's expression changed. His smile vanished, replaced by a look of cold fury. "But I also have an announcement to make," he continued, his voice hardening. "I have discovered a plot, a conspiracy against me, against Whitmore, against the king." A hush fell over the hall, the music abruptly ceasing. The guests stared at him, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. Master Giles, his face paling, rose to his feet, his voice trembling. This is outrageous," he stammered. I deny these accusations." Lord Ashford, his expression darkening, also stood up. "This is a fabrication," he declared. "A plot to discredit us." Sir Hugh ignored their protests. He turned to Gareth, his loyal spy, who stepped forward, holding a bundle of documents. "These are the letters," Gareth said, his voice clear and strong. "The evidence of their treachery." Letters exchanged between Master Giles, Lord Ashford, and several others, outlining their plans to overthrow Sir Hugh, to seize Whitmore, to rebel against the king. The letters were read aloud, their contents damning. They detailed the conspirators' plans, their financial transactions, their recruitment of mercenaries. The evidence was irrefutable. The guests gasped, their faces filled with horror and disbelief. The conspirators, their faces contorted with rage and fear, tried to deny the accusations, but their voices were drowned out by the uproar. Sir Hugh's men at arms moved swiftly, apprehending the traitors, disarming them, binding their hands. The feast had become a trap, a scene of swift and decisive justice. Rosamund watched, her heart pounding with a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that the plot had been exposed, that Sir Hugh was safe. Sadness for the betrayal, for the loss of trust, for the price of honor. As the conspirators were led away, their faces filled with shame and defeat, Sir Hugh turned to Rosamund, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and something more. He held her gaze and gave a single nod. He knew what this had cost her. Her home, her friends, even her family in some ways. "You were right, Rosamund," he said, his voice low and intimate. "We needed proof. And you helped me find it." She had. She had played her part, a dangerous game of deception, to protect him, to save Whitmore. And in doing so, she had proven her loyalty, her courage, her love. But the victory was bittersweet. The price of honor was high. The betrayal had cut deep, leaving scars that would take time to heal. The trust that had been broken would be difficult, if not impossible, to restore. She looked around the hall at the remaining guests, who averted their eyes. Whitmore was safe, but it would never be the same. The feast, meant to celebrate the king's birthday, had become a scene of judgment, a reckoning of loyalty and betrayal. And Rosamund, standing beside her husband, knew that their journey was far from over. They had won this battle, but the war for trust, for peace, for love, was just beginning. The price they had paid would be a constant burden. Chapter 12. Echoes in the Chapel. The days following the exposure of the plot were a somber reckoning. Whitmore, once a place of bustling activity and familiar comfort, felt hollow, wounded. The conspirators, including Master Giles and Lord Ashford, were imprisoned, awaiting trial for treason. Lord Edmund, Rosamund's father, though not directly involved in the plot, was devastated by the betrayal of his advisors, his trust shattered. He retreated into himself, his usual stern demeanor replaced by a weary resignation. Rosamund felt the weight of the events deeply. She had helped save Sir Hugh, saved Whitmore, but at a great cost. The fabric of her home, Her relationships had been torn, perhaps irreparably. She found herself wandering the castle, seeking solace in the familiar spaces, but finding only echoes of the past, reminders of what had been lost. One place she found herself drawn to was the chapel, the small, stone sanctuary where she had spent countless hours in prayer and reflection. The scent of incense, the flickering candlelight, the quiet stillness, it offered a temporary respite from the turmoil that surrounded her. One evening, as she sat alone in the chapel, her thoughts swirling with doubt and uncertainty, she heard a soft footstep behind her. She turned, expecting to see Alara, or perhaps one of the servants. But it was Sir Hugh. He stood in the doorway, his black armor replaced by a simple linen tunic, his face softened by the candlelight. He looked different, less like a warrior, more like a man. "Rosamond," he said, his voice a low rumble. "May I join you?" She nodded, her heart quickening. She had not expected to see him here, in this place of quiet contemplation. He sat beside her on the stone bench, his presence filling the small space. They sat in silence for a long moment, the only sound the gentle crackling of the candles. I come here often," Rosamond said, her voice barely a whisper. To find peace.
To pray."
He nodded, his gaze fixed on the altar. "I understand," he said. "I, too, seek solace in quiet places."
She was surprised.
She had not imagined him as a man of faith, a man who sought comfort in prayer. Do you believe?" she asked, her voice hesitant. He paused, considering his words carefully. "I believe in duty," he said finally, "in honor, in protecting those I am sworn to protect. But beyond that," she pressed, "do you believe in a higher power? In forgiveness?" He hesitated again, then spoke, his voice low and raw. "I struggle with forgiveness, Rosamond," he admitted. "I have seen too much betrayal, too much cruelty. It is difficult to forgive." His words resonated with her. She, too, struggled with forgiveness, with the betrayal of her own people, her own friends. "But without forgiveness," she said, her voice soft, "how can we heal? How can we move forward?" He looked at her then, his stormy gray eyes meeting hers. There was a vulnerability in his gaze, a hint of longing. I do not know," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Perhaps that is what I am seeking here. A way to forgive. A way to heal." She reached out, her hand gently touching his. His skin was warm, his touch surprisingly gentle. "We can help each other," she said, her voice firm. "We can learn to forgive together. We can heal together." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and something more. He squeezed her hand, a silent acknowledgement of their shared pain, their shared hope. As they sat there, in the quiet stillness of the chapel, Rosamond felt a shift in their relationship. The echoes of the past, the pain of betrayal, began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of connection, of understanding. They were two wounded souls, seeking solace, seeking healing, seeking forgiveness. He started to visit her frequently, sharing small snippets of this day. He sought her counsel on matters of the castle, of the realm. He was learning to rely on her, learning to trust her. He looked at her with something other than suspicion or formality. "I will rebuild Whitmore," he stated, after a long stretch of pensive silence. "We will," she corrected. He smiled, a genuine smile, at her audacity. The chapel, a place of prayer and reflection, had become a sanctuary for their growing bond, a place where they could shed their armor, their defenses, and connect on a deeper, more meaningful level. The echoes of the past still lingered, but they were no longer solely reminders of pain, they were also reminders of resilience, of hope, of the possibility of a new beginning. Forgiveness, like a fragile seedling, began to take root in the barren landscape of their hearts, nourished by shared pain and a growing, undeniable love. Chapter 13. The Lion and the Rose. The rebuilding of Whitmore, both physically and emotionally, became a shared endeavor, a testament to Rosamond and Sir Hugh's growing partnership. The castle walls were repaired, the damaged structures rebuilt, but the true healing was happening within, in the hearts of the people, and in the bond between Rosamund and Sir Hugh. Rosamund took an active role in restoring morale, reaching out to the remaining staff and tenants, reassuring them of Sir Hugh's commitment to justice and fairness. She organized community gatherings, feasts, and celebrations, fostering a sense of unity and belonging. She used her gentle strength, her compassion, to mend the wounds of betrayal, to rebuild trust. Sir Hugh, in turn, began to soften his approach, tempering his warriors' instincts with a newfound understanding of diplomacy and empathy. He listened to the concerns of his people, seeking their counsel, involving them in the decision-making process. He implemented fair policies, ensuring justice for all, regardless of their social standing. He was learning to rule not just with strength, but with wisdom and compassion. The transformation was gradual, but noticeable. Whitmore, once a place of fear and suspicion, began to regain its former vibrancy, its sense of community. The people, initially wary of Sir Hugh, began to see him not just as a conqueror, but as a protector, a leader who genuinely cared for their well-being. The relationship between Rosamund and Sir Hugh continued to deepen, evolving from a forced alliance to a genuine partnership and, tentatively, into something more. They spent more time together, sharing meals, walking in the gardens, discussing matters of the castle and the realm. They learned to rely on each other, to trust each other, to respect each other. One evening, as they sat together in the library, poring over maps and documents, Sir Hugh turned to Rosamund, his stormy gray eyes meeting hers. "Rosamund," he said, his voice low and hesitant, I owe you an apology." She looked at him, surprised. "An apology? For what?" For how I treated you in the beginning," he said, his voice filled with regret. "For my coldness, my suspicion. I did not trust you. I did not see you." She smiled gently, her heart filled with understanding. "I understand," she said. "You had been hurt. You had been betrayed. It was natural to be wary. But you proved me wrong," he said, his voice gaining strength. "You showed me your loyalty, your courage, your kindness. You saved my life. You saved Whitmore." He reached out, his hand gently cupping her face. His touch was warm, his gaze intense. "I am grateful, Rosamund," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Grateful for your presence in my life. Grateful for you." She leaned into his touch, her heart overflowing with affection. "And I am grateful for you, Hugh," she said, her voice soft. For showing me your strength, your vulnerability, your heart." It was the first time she had called him by his given name, without the formality of his title. It was a small gesture, but it was significant, a sign of their growing intimacy, their deepening connection. He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes, transforming his stern features. He leaned in, his lips gently brushing hers. It was a soft, tentative kiss, a promise of something more, a declaration of love. The kiss deepened, a passionate embrace that sealed their bond, their commitment to each other. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated emotion, a release of all the pent-up fear, uncertainty, and longing. As they broke apart, their eyes locked, filled with a shared understanding, a shared love. "The Black Lion and the Whitmore Rose," he said, his voice a low, husky murmur, tracing the embroidered flower of her house's crest on her sleeve. "An unlikely pairing, perhaps, but a strong one." She nodded, her heart swelling with happiness. "A union forged in duty," she said, "but transformed by love." He gathered her into his arms, holding her tightly as the fire crackled nearby. He would protect her always. She knew it beyond a shadow of a doubt. He was not just a fearsome warrior. He had always been her protector. Their love, like a rose blooming in the harsh northern climate, had blossomed amidst adversity, a testament to their resilience, their strength, and their unwavering commitment to each other. The lion and the rose, once symbols of separate houses, separate worlds, were now intertwined, united by a love that had conquered fear, betrayal, and the shadows of the past. It was a love that would endure, a love that would heal, a love that would rebuild Whitmore and their lives together. Chapter 14. A kingdom divided. News arrived at Whitmore of growing unrest in the kingdom. King Edmund, weakened by age and illness, was losing his grip on power. Rival factions, ambitious lords vying for control, were stirring up rebellion, threatening to plunge the realm into civil war. The stability of the kingdom, the very foundation upon which Whitmore's newfound peace rested, was crumbling. Sir Hugh, ever loyal to the crown, was summoned to a council of war, a gathering of the king's most trusted advisors and military leaders. He was tasked with raising an army, with preparing for battle, with defending the realm against the encroaching chaos. The news filled Rosamund with dread. She had just begun to find happiness, to build a life with Sir Hugh, and now he was being called away to face the dangers of war. She feared for his safety, for the future of their fragile union. "Must you go?" she asked, her voice trembling, as they stood together in their chambers, the evening before his departure. He looked at her, his stormy gray eyes filled with a mixture of regret and determination. "I must, Rosamund," he said. "It is my duty. My loyalty to the king demands it." She understood, but her heart ached at the thought of him leaving, of the uncertainty that lay ahead. But it is dangerous," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You could be killed." He took her hands in his touch firm and reassuring. "I am a warrior, Rosamund," he said. "I have faced danger before. I will return to you." His words offered a sliver of comfort, but she couldn't shake her fear. She had seen the brutality of war, the toll it took on men, on families, on kingdoms. "Promise me," she said, her voice pleading. "Promise me you will come back." He leaned in, his lips gently brushing hers. "I promise," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I will return to you. I will fight for our future, for our love." The kiss was passionate, desperate, a seal of their commitment, a promise of their enduring bond. The following morning, as Sir Hugh prepared to depart, Rosamund stood beside him in the courtyard, watching him mount his warhorse, Midnight. He was clad in his black armor, his sword at his side, a figure of formidable strength and unwavering resolve. He looked at her, his eyes filled with love and a hint of sadness. "Take care of Whitmore, Rosamund," he said. "Take care of yourself." "And you take care of yourself, Hugh," she replied, her voice trembling. "Come back to me." He nodded, a single, solemn gesture. He then spurred his horse, leading his men out of the castle gates, towards the uncertain future, towards the war that threatened to engulf the kingdom. Rosamund watched him go, her heart heavy with sorrow and fear. She stood there long after he had disappeared from sight, her gaze fixed on the horizon, praying for his safe return, praying for peace. The days that followed were filled with anxiety and uncertainty. News from the front was scarce, unreliable. Rumors of battles, of victories and defeats, circulated through the castle, fueling Rosamund's fears. She threw herself into managing Whitmore, overseeing the defenses, ensuring the well-being of her people. She found strength in her duty, in her responsibility to protect the home she had come to love, the home she had built with Sir Hugh. She received letters from him, brief, hastily written missives that spoke of his loyalty, his determination, and his love for her. He told her of the challenges he faced, the battles he fought, the sacrifices he made. "My dearest Rosamund," he wrote, that he carried her in his heart. His words were a lifeline, a source of comfort and hope in the midst of the darkness. She wrote back to him, sharing news of Whitmore, of the people, of her unwavering love and support. She told him of her prayers for his safety, for his victory, for his return. The kingdom was divided, torn apart by conflict, but their love remained a beacon of hope, a testament to their enduring bond, a promise of a future together. Rosamund, alone at Whitmore, held on to that promise, drawing strength from her love for Sir Hugh, from her duty to her people, and from her unwavering faith in his return. The division of the kingdom mirrored the division in her heart, fear for his safety, and unwavering love. Chapter 15. The Serpent's Kiss. Weeks turned into months, and still, Sir Hugh remained at war. Rosamund continued to manage Whitmore, Her days filled with the responsibilities of leadership, her nights haunted by worries for her husband's safety. The news from the front remained sporadic and unreliable, fueling her anxiety. One evening, a messenger arrived at Whitmore, bearing not a letter from Sir Hugh, but a summons from the Queen. Rosamond was to travel to the capital to attend the Queen at court. The summons was unexpected and unsettling. Rosamond knew that the Queen, a shrewd and ambitious woman, had always been wary of Sir Hugh's power and influence. She suspected that the summons was not a friendly gesture, but a calculated move, a way to exert control, to perhaps even hold her hostage. She shared her concerns with her father, Lord Edmund, who had regained some of his former strength and was now actively involved in advising Rosamond. "Be careful, Rosamond," he warned. "The Queen is a dangerous woman. She is not to be trusted." "I know, father," Rosamond replied, "but I have no choice. I must go." To refuse would be seen as defiance, as disloyalty. She prepared for the journey, her heart filled with trepidation. She knew that she was entering a viper's nest, a court rife with intrigue, betrayal, and hidden agendas. She arrived at the capital, a sprawling city of grandeur and squalor, a place of stark contrasts. The royal palace was a magnificent structure, a testament to the king's power and wealth, but it also felt cold, impersonal, a place of shadows and secrets. She was greeted by the Queen's ladies-in-waiting, a group of elegant but watchful women, their eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. They escorted her to the Queen's chambers, a lavishly decorated room filled with tapestries, paintings, and the scent of heavy perfume. The Queen, a woman of striking beauty, but with a cold, calculating gaze, received her with a formal courtesy, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Lady Rosamond," she said, her voice smooth and melodious. "Welcome to court. We are pleased to have you." Rosamond curtsied, her voice steady despite her nervousness. "Your Majesty," she replied, "I am honored to be here." The Queen gestured for her to sit, and they engaged in a conversation that was seemingly polite, but filled with subtle undertones of threat and manipulation. The Queen inquired about Whitmore, about Sir Hugh, about the state of the rebellion. Rosamond answered carefully, choosing her words with caution, revealing nothing that could be used against her or her husband. She knew that she was being tested, that the Queen was probing for weaknesses, for vulnerabilities. As the days passed, Rosamond found herself trapped in a web of courtly intrigue, a constant dance of deception and manipulation. She was surrounded by spies, by informants, by enemies disguised as friends. She discovered that the Queen was not simply wary of Sir Hugh, she was actively working against him. She was spreading rumors, undermining his authority, and even secretly supporting the rebels. The revelation shocked Rosamond, but it also confirmed her suspicions. The Queen saw Sir Hugh as a threat to her own power, a rival who needed to be eliminated. Rosamond realized that she was in grave danger. She was a pawn in the Queen's game, a hostage whose life could be forfeit at any moment. She had to find a way to escape, to warn Sir Hugh, to expose the Queen's treachery. One evening, as she was walking through the palace gardens, she was approached by a man she had not seen before, a knight clad in simple, unadorned armor. "Lady Rosamond," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I am a friend. I know of the Queen's plot." She looked at him, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Who are you?" she asked. "How do I know I can trust you?"
"My name is Sir Cian," he said.
"And I am loyal to Sir Hugh. I have been secretly working against the Queen, gathering information, waiting for an opportunity to strike." He showed her a ring, a signet ring bearing the Fitzalan lion, the same symbol that Sir Hugh wore. It was a sign of his loyalty, a proof of his trustworthiness. Rosamond felt a surge of hope. She was not alone. There were others who opposed the Queen, who were willing to fight for justice, for the truth. Sir Cian revealed to her the Queen's plan. She intended to use Rosamond as bait, to lure Sir Hugh into a trap, to assassinate him. She was planning to send a false message, a forged letter from Rosamond, summoning Sir Hugh to a secluded location where he would be ambushed and killed. The plan was audacious, ruthless, and deadly. Rosamund knew that she had to act quickly, to warn Sir Hugh, to save his life. The serpent's kiss, the queen's false affection, had been a prelude to a deadly strike. Rosamund was determined to foil the plot, even if it meant risking her own life. She and Sir Cian will make plans of their own. Chapter 16. Flames of Rebellion. With Sir Cian's help, Rosamund devised a plan to counter the queen's treachery. It was a daring, dangerous plan, one that required courage, cunning, and a willingness to risk everything. They decided to use the queen's own weapon, deception, against her. They would intercept the false message, the forged letter summoning Sir Hugh to the trap, and replace it with a message of their own, warning him of the plot and instructing him to prepare for a counterattack. It was a delicate operation, one that required precise timing and flawless execution. They had to work in secret, avoiding the queen's spies, the ever-watchful eyes of the court. Sir Cian, using his connections within the palace, managed to intercept the forged letter before it could be sent. He then carefully crafted a new message, mimicking Rosamund's handwriting, warning Sir Hugh of the queen's plot and instructing him to gather his forces and prepare for a surprise attack on the capital. Rosamund, meanwhile, used her position at court to gather information, to identify the queen's allies, to uncover the full extent of the conspiracy. She discovered that the queen was not only working with the rebels but also with several foreign powers who were eager to see the kingdom destabilized and weakened. The revelation confirmed the gravity of the situation. The rebellion was not simply a domestic dispute, it was a threat to the entire realm, a conspiracy that could lead to invasion and the collapse of the kingdom. As the day of the planned ambush approached, Rosamund's anxiety grew. She knew that Sir Hugh was walking into a trap, that his life was on the line. She prayed for his safety, for his victory, for his return. On the day of the supposed meeting, Rosamund feigned illness, retiring to her chambers to avoid arousing suspicion. She waited, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. News arrived at the palace of a sudden, unexpected attack. Sir Hugh, instead of falling into the queen's trap, had launched a preemptive strike, his forces storming the capital, catching the queen and her allies by surprise. The palace was thrown into chaos. Guards rushed to defend the queen, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Sir Hugh's men, led by Gareth, fought their way through the palace, their swords clashing against the queen's defenders. Rosamund, hearing the sounds of battle, knew that the moment of reckoning had arrived. She emerged from her chambers, her face pale but determined. She was no longer a pawn, a hostage, she was a warrior, ready to fight for her husband, for her kingdom, for her love. She encountered Sir Cian in the corridor, his sword drawn, his face grim.
"It has begun," he said.
"Sir Hugh is here." Together, they joined the battle, fighting alongside Sir Hugh's men, their courage fueled by their loyalty, their love, and their determination to end the queen's treachery. The fighting was fierce, brutal, but Sir Hugh's forces, driven by their loyalty to their leader and their desire for justice, prevailed. The queen's allies were defeated, captured, or killed. The queen herself was found hiding in her chambers, her face contorted with fear and rage. She was taken prisoner, her reign of terror brought to an abrupt end. As the dust settled, Rosamund found Sir Hugh in the great hall, his armor stained with blood, his face weary but triumphant. He saw her, his eyes widening with relief and love. "Rosamund!" he cried, his voice choked with emotion. He rushed towards her, embracing her tightly, his body trembling with the aftermath of the battle. "You are safe," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You are alive." "And you," she replied, her voice trembling. You came. You saved us." He held her close, his lips gently brushing hers. It was a kiss of reunion, of relief, of enduring love. The flames of rebellion had been extinguished, the queen's treachery exposed, the kingdom saved. But the victory had come at a cost. The battle had been bloody, the scars of betrayal deep. The rebuilding of the kingdom, like the rebuilding of Whitmore, would be a long and arduous process. But Rosamond and Sir Hugh, standing together amidst the ruins of the palace, knew that they could face any challenge, overcome any obstacle, as long as they had each other. Their love, forged in the fires of adversity, had become a beacon of hope, a testament to their strength, their resilience, and their unwavering commitment to each other and to their kingdom. The flames of rebellion revealed a stronger union. Chapter 17. Crossroads of Fate. With the Queen's rebellion crushed and the kingdom tentatively stabilized, Sir Hugh was hailed as a hero, a savior. King Edmund, frail but still holding onto the reins of power, publicly thanked him, acknowledging his loyalty and his courage. But the king's health was failing rapidly, and the question of succession loomed large, casting a shadow over the newfound peace. There were several contenders for the throne, ambitious nobles with their own agendas and their own armies. The kingdom teetered on the brink of another civil war, another power struggle that could tear it apart. Sir Hugh, weary of war and longing for a peaceful life with Rosamond, found himself at a crossroads. He could use his newfound influence, his military strength, to seize the throne for himself, to become king. He had the support of the army, the respect of the people, and the love of Rosamond. But he hesitated. He had never sought power for power's sake. He had always been driven by duty, by loyalty, by a desire to protect his people, his land, his love. He confided in Rosamond, sharing his doubts, his fears, his aspirations. They sat together in the gardens of the royal palace, a temporary sanctuary amidst the turmoil of the court. "I do not know what to do, Rosamond," he said, his voice troubled. "I could become king. I could rule this kingdom. But is that what I truly want?" Rosamond looked at him, her eyes filled with understanding and a hint of concern. She knew the burden he carried, the weight of responsibility that rested on his shoulders. "What does your heart tell you, Hugh?" she asked, her voice gentle. "What do you truly desire?" He paused, considering her words. He thought of Whitmore, of the peace he had found there with her, of the life they had begun to build together. He thought of the endless battles, the constant struggle for power, the sacrifices that kingship demanded. I long for peace, Rosamond," he said finally, his voice filled with longing. "I long for a life with you, a life away from the court, away from the war, away from the endless struggle for power." She smiled, her heart filled with relief and love. She, too, longed for peace, for a simple life with him, away from the intrigues and dangers of the court. "Then that is what you should choose, Hugh," she said, her voice firm. "Do not let ambition, or duty, or the expectations of others dictate your path. Choose your own happiness. Choose our love." His eyes met hers, filled with gratitude and a newfound resolve. He realized that she was right. He did not need to be king to be happy, to be fulfilled. He had already found his kingdom, his purpose, his love in her. He made his decision. He would not seek the throne. He would support a peaceful transition of power, a successor who could unite the kingdom, who could bring lasting peace. He announced his decision publicly at a gathering of the nobles and the royal council. His words were met with surprise, with disbelief, with a grudging respect. He had the power to seize the throne, but he chose not to. He chose peace over power, love over ambition. His decision paved the way for a peaceful succession. A distant cousin of the king, a man of integrity and wisdom, was chosen as the new heir, a choice that was widely accepted by the nobles and the people. With the question of succession settled, Sir Hugh and Rosamond prepared to return to Whitmore, to the life they had left behind, the life they had fought for, the life they longed to resume. As they stood together on the steps of the royal palace, ready to depart, Sir Hugh turned to Rosamond, his eyes filled with love and gratitude. "Thank you, Rosamond," he said, his voice choked with emotion.
"Thank you for guiding me,
"For loving me, for helping me find my way." She smiled, her heart overflowing with happiness. "And thank you, Hugh," she replied, her voice soft.
for choosing me,
"For choosing us, for choosing love." They embraced, a long, passionate embrace that sealed their bond, their commitment to each other, their future together. They had reached a crossroads of fate, a pivotal moment in their lives, and they had chosen the path of love, of peace, of a shared destiny. They were returning to Whitmore, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as husband and wife, as partners, as lovers, ready to embrace the simple joys of life, to build a future together, to create their own kingdom of love and happiness. Chapter 18. The Siege of Secrets. Their return to Whitmore was met with joyous celebration. The people, relieved by Sir Hugh's safe return and grateful for his role in securing the kingdom's peace, welcomed them with open arms. Bonfires blazed, feasts were held, and the castle echoed with laughter and music. It felt like a homecoming, a return to a place of sanctuary and love. But even amidst the celebrations, a sense of unease lingered. The scars of the past, the betrayals and conspiracies, were not easily forgotten. Rosamund and Sir Hugh knew that rebuilding trust, both within Whitmore and within themselves, would be a long and delicate process. One evening, as they sat together in the library, a familiar space where they had shared so many intimate conversations, Rosamund noticed a shadow of worry cross Sir Hugh's face. "What troubles you, my love?" she asked, her voice gentle. He hesitated, his gaze drifting towards the window, towards the darkening landscape. "There are still secrets, Rosamund," he said, his voice low and troubled. "Secrets that haunt me." She knew what he meant. The past, with its betrayals and losses, still cast a long shadow over their lives. There were wounds that had not fully healed, trusts that had not been fully restored. "What secrets, Hugh?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. He turned to her, his stormy gray eyes filled with a mixture of pain and a yearning for confession. "The Queen's rebellion, it was not the only conspiracy," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "There was another. One that I was involved in." Rosamund's heart quickened. She had sensed that there was something more, something he had been holding back, a secret that weighed heavily on his soul. He told her the story, a tale of his younger years, of a time before he had met her, a time when he had been a less experienced, more impetuous warrior. He had been involved in a plot, a secret mission to assassinate a foreign king, a mission that had gone horribly wrong. "It was a dishonorable act," he said, his voice filled with shame. I justified it at the time, claiming it was for the good of the kingdom. But it was wrong. It was a betrayal of my own principles." He told her how the mission had failed, how his men had been killed, how he had barely escaped with his life. He had carried the guilt, the shame, the secret, for years, a burden that had weighed heavily on his soul. Rosamund listened in silence, her heart aching for him, for the pain he had endured, for the secret he had carried for so long. She understood his shame, his guilt, but she also saw his remorse, his desire for redemption. Why are you telling me this now?" she asked, her voice soft. He looked at her, his eyes filled with love and a desperate need for forgiveness. "Because I cannot bear to keep secrets from you any longer, Rosamund," he said. I need you to know the truth. I need your forgiveness." She reached out, her hand gently cupping his face. His skin was warm, his touch familiar and comforting. "Oh, Hugh," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "There is nothing to forgive. You were young. You were misguided. You have repented. You have changed." He searched her eyes, his gaze intense, seeking confirmation, seeking absolution. "But it was dishonorable," he said, his voice trembling. I betrayed my own code. "And you have spent years atoning for that betrayal," she said, her voice firm. "You have dedicated your life to honor, to duty, to protecting others. You have more than redeemed yourself." She leaned in, her lips gently brushing his. It was a kiss of forgiveness, of understanding, of unconditional love. "I love you, Hugh," she said, her voice soft but clear. "All of you. Your strength, your vulnerability, even your flaws. I love you for who you are and for who you are becoming." He embraced her tightly, his body trembling with relief and gratitude. He had confessed his deepest secret, his darkest shame, and she had not rejected him. She had forgiven him. She had loved him. The siege of secrets, the internal battle he had waged for years, was finally over. He had laid bare his soul, and she had accepted him, loved him, unconditionally. The weight that had burdened him for so long began to lift, replaced by a sense of peace, of liberation. They had weathered another storm, another test of their love, and they had emerged stronger, more united, more deeply connected. The sharing of his secret had broken down the final barrier between them, creating a bond of trust and intimacy that was unbreakable. Chapter 19. Blood and Redemption. The peace that Rosamund and Sir Hugh had found was shattered once more, not by external forces, but by a ghost from the past. A letter arrived at Whitmore, bearing the seal of a foreign kingdom, the very kingdom where Sir Hugh had participated in the failed assassination attempt years ago. The letter was a demand for justice, an accusation of murder, a threat of war. The foreign king, having learned of Sir Hugh's involvement in the plot, was seeking retribution. He demanded that Sir Hugh be handed over to face trial, or he would declare war on the kingdom on Whitmore. The news sent a chill through Rosamund. She had thought that chapter of Sir Hugh's life was closed, that his secret was buried, that they could finally move on. But the past, like a relentless tide, had returned to haunt them. Sir Hugh, upon reading the letter, was stoic, his face a mask of grim determination. He knew that he could not escape his past, that he had to face the consequences of his actions. "I will go," he said, his voice firm. "I will face their justice. I will not allow my past to endanger Whitmore, to endanger you." Rosamund was horrified. She could not bear the thought of him being handed over to his enemies, of him being imprisoned, tortured, or even killed. "No, Hugh," she cried, her voice filled with desperation. "You cannot go. They will kill you." He took her hands in his touch firm and reassuring. "I am a warrior, Rosamund," he said. "I have faced death before. I am not afraid." "But I am," she said, her voice trembling. I cannot lose you. I love you." He leaned in, his lips gently brushing hers. It was a kiss of farewell, of desperation, of enduring love. "I will return to you, Rosamund," he said, his voice choked with emotion.
I promise. I will find a way.
But she knew that his chances were slim. He was walking into a trap, a web of vengeance and political intrigue. He was sacrificing himself to save her, to save Whitmore. She refused to accept his decision. She would not let him face this alone. She would fight for him, even if it meant defying kings, even if it meant risking her own life. She rallied the people of Whitmore, appealing to their loyalty, their sense of justice, their love for Sir Hugh. She told them the truth, the whole truth, about his past, about his mistakes, about his redemption. The people, initially shocked by the revelation, rallied to his defense. They had seen his transformation, his commitment to honor, his love for Rosamund and for Whitmore. They would not betray him. They would stand by him. Rosamund then sent a message to the new king, the young, wise ruler who had succeeded King Edmund. She pleaded for his intervention, for his support, for justice. The king, recognizing Sir Hugh's loyalty and his service to the kingdom, agreed to help. He sent a delegation to the foreign kingdom, a group of skilled diplomats and negotiators, to try to find a peaceful resolution, to avert war. The negotiations were long and arduous, fraught with tension and uncertainty. The foreign king, driven by a thirst for revenge, was initially unyielding. But the diplomats, aided by Rosamund's impassioned pleas and the united support of Whitmore, gradually chipped away at his resolve. They presented evidence of Sir Hugh's changed character, of his commitment to honor, of his service to the kingdom. They argued that executing him would not bring back the dead, would not serve justice, would only perpetuate a cycle of violence and hatred. Finally, after weeks of tense negotiations, a compromise was reached. Sir Hugh would not be handed over to face trial. Instead, he would pay a substantial indemnity, a symbolic act of atonement, and he would pledge his continued loyalty to the new king, a guarantee of his future good behavior. It was a victory, a hard-won victory, but it was also a reminder of the fragility of peace, of the enduring power of the past. Sir Hugh, upon learning of the agreement, was relieved, but also humbled. He had been spared, not by his own strength, but by the love and loyalty of Rosamond, of the people of Whitmore, of the new king. He returned to Rosamond, a changed man. The ordeal had stripped away the last vestiges of his warrior's arrogance, his pride. He was more vulnerable, more humble, more deeply appreciative of the love and support he had received. He thanked her profusely, holding her close. "You have saved me from the consequences of my past," he said. "We did it together," she reminded him. The blood spilled in his past had been atoned for, not with more blood, but with redemption, with love, with a renewed commitment to honor and justice. The past could not be erased, but it could be overcome. And they, together, had overcome it. Chapter 20. The Reckoning of Love and Duty. With the threat of war averted and Sir Hugh's past finally laid to rest, a sense of profound peace settled over Whitmore. The castle, once a stage for conspiracies and betrayals, now felt like a true home, a sanctuary of love and security. Rosamond and Sir Hugh, their bond strengthened by the trials they had endured, embraced their new life together, a life dedicated to each other, to their people, and to the pursuit of lasting happiness. They focused on rebuilding Whitmore, not just the physical structures, but the spirit of the community. They implemented reforms, ensuring fair treatment for all, promoting justice and compassion. They fostered a sense of unity, of belonging, of shared purpose. Rosamond, using her gentle strength and her innate wisdom, became a beloved leader, a confidant to her people, a source of inspiration and guidance. She established schools, hospitals, and charitable organizations, improving the lives of those under her care. Sir Hugh, tempered by his experiences, became a wise and just ruler, a protector of his people, a champion of peace. He used his military skills not for conquest, but for defense, ensuring the safety and security of Whitmore and its surrounding lands. Their love for each other deepened, blossoming into a profound and enduring partnership. They shared their joys and sorrows, their hopes and fears, their dreams and aspirations. They found solace in each other's arms, strength in each other's support, and unwavering love in each other's hearts. One evening, as they stood together on the battlements of Whitmore, watching the sun set over the rolling hills, Sir Hugh turned to Rosamond, his eyes filled with love and a hint of wistfulness. "We have come a long way, Rosamond," he said, his voice soft. "From reluctant bride and brooding warrior to this." She smiled, her heart overflowing with happiness. "We have," she agreed. "We have built a life together. A life beyond my wildest dreams." He took her hand in his touch warm and familiar. "And yet," he said, his voice hesitant, "there is one thing missing." She looked at him, her eyes questioning. She knew what he meant. They had been married for years, but they had no children, no heir to carry on their legacy. "It may not be possible, Hugh," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. "We have tried. It seems fate has other plans." He squeezed her hand, his gaze filled with love and acceptance. "Perhaps," he said, "but even if we never have children of our own, we have each other. And we have Whitmore. Our legacy will be the love we share, the good we do, the peace we build." His words comforted her, easing the ache in her heart. She knew that he was right. Their love, their partnership, their commitment to Whitmore was a legacy in itself, a testament to their strength, their resilience, and their enduring bond. As they stood there, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, Rosamond felt a surge of unexpected hope. She placed her hand on her stomach, a subtle gesture, a secret wish. Months later, her wish came true. She discovered that she was with child, a miracle, a blessing, a symbol of their enduring love and the promise of a new generation. Sir Hugh, upon learning the news, was overjoyed, his stern features softening with emotion, his eyes filled with tears of happiness. He embraced Rosamond, his touch gentle and protective, his heart overflowing with love and gratitude. The news spread quickly through Whitmore, bringing joy and celebration to the entire community. The people rejoiced, seeing the pregnancy as a sign of hope, of renewal, of a bright future for Whitmore. Rosamond and Sir Hugh, their love deepened by the prospect of parenthood, prepared for the arrival of their child, their hearts filled with anticipation and unwavering love. They had faced countless challenges, overcome numerous obstacles, and emerged stronger, more united, more deeply in love. Their journey, from a forced marriage to a true partnership, from fear and suspicion to trust and understanding, from duty and obligation to love and devotion, had been a long and arduous one. But they had reached their destination, a place of peace, of happiness, of enduring love. The reckoning of love and duty had led them to a place where both could coexist, where both could flourish, where both could create a legacy that would last for generations to come. The future was theirs. It was secured with love. Epilogue. Years passed, and Whitmore flourished under the wise and compassionate rule of Sir Hugh and Lady Rosamond. Their child, a son named Edmund after Rosamond's father, grew into a strong and noble young man, embodying the best qualities of both his parents. He was followed by two daughters, Ilara and Lyra, who in turn completed the picture of their loving family. Rosamond and Sir Hugh, their hair now streaked with silver, their faces etched with the lines of time and experience, remained deeply in love, their bond stronger than ever. They had weathered storms, faced betrayals, overcome obstacles, and built a life together that was a testament to their resilience, their courage, and their unwavering commitment to each other. They often walked together in the gardens of Whitmore, the same gardens where they had shared so many intimate moments, the same gardens that had witnessed the blossoming of their love. They would reminisce about their past, about the challenges they had faced, about the victories they had won. One evening, as they sat on the stone bench, surrounded by the fragrant roses that were a symbol of their enduring love, Rosamond turned to Sir Hugh, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and contentment. "We have been blessed, Hugh," she said, her voice soft. "We have built a beautiful life together." He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners, his gaze filled with love and adoration. "We have, Rosamond," he agreed. "And it is all because of you.
You saved me.
You showed me the meaning of love, of forgiveness, of true happiness." She leaned in, her lips gently brushing his. It was a kiss of enduring love, of gratitude, of a lifetime of shared experiences. "And you, Hugh," she replied, her voice choked with emotion. You gave me strength. You gave me purpose. You gave me a love I never thought possible." They sat there in silence, their hands intertwined, their hearts filled with a profound sense of peace and contentment. They had built a kingdom of love, a legacy of compassion, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over Whitmore, they knew that their journey was nearing its end. But they were not afraid. They had lived a full life, a life filled with love, with purpose, with enduring happiness. They had faced the reckoning of love and duty, and they had chosen love, a love that had conquered all, a love that would endure for eternity, a love that had transformed them, their lives, and the very heart of Whitmore. Their legacy was secure, carried on by their children, by their people, and by the enduring spirit of love that permeated every corner of their beloved home. They held each other close. Their love story would be told for generations to come. It began with duty and bloomed into a love that changed the course of their lives and the fate of their home.